Senator Kissel's always a hard act to follow, but I don't necessarily have a question. I'd just like to make a few comments. First of all, I thank the Human Services Committee for bringing this bill forward. I'd like to put a few things on the record, I guess. Obesity is a disease. It's been classified by the Centers for Disease Control as a disease. I do not think that it is fair, nor is it accurate to describe obesity as a lifestyle or personal choice. Obesity and food addiction has been shown through scientific evidence from some of the greatest medical centers in the United States and in other parts of the world to chemically be shown to be more powerful and addictive than opioid drugs. And the difference being, of course, that as is mentioned about going to fast food restaurants, you can leave here and in 5 minutes walk to some place and buy for $10 or $12 a bag with 1,000 calories of food and 100 grams of fat in it, just like that, without even having to think about it. Whereas perhaps it would be a lot more difficult to acquire an illegal drug. I think the other thing that's important to put on the record is that no one chooses to acquire a disease. No one chooses to get sick. There are lifestyle choices that we make. People smoke. Yes, people overeat. They eat the wrong foods, as Senator Kissel spoke to. But no one chooses to do this, at least in my humble opinion, with the knowledge of saying, I'm going to do this, and it's okay if I get sick by doing this. I don't think that's the way people think. So bad choices, maybe not. The other thing I think it's important to articulate here, and the good chair of the Human Services Committee, I believe, articulated this earlier, is that services under the provisions of this bill are not automatically provided to anyone. Not anyone. You don't just walk into a doctor's office if you're covered under this service and say, hey, I want bariatric surgery, or I want prescription medication to treat metabolic conditions. You must have a certain trigger. You must have a BMI of 35 or higher with a comorbidity. Obesity in the United States is defined as a BMI over 30. So if you don't have a BMI over 35, you cannot acquire services under the provisions of this bill. And you must have an existing comorbidity, which is defined in the bill as heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. If you look at what I think is the return on the investment here, and I speak from personal experience, the return on the investment. Yeah, there's a cost to doing this today. There's a cost to providing any medical service, that whether it's the taxpayers paying for it or private insurance, which I'll speak to in a moment. But generally speaking, when we take upon providing services to someone that are treating a disease, and I'm not a medical doctor, we're surrounded by some fine doctors here in the circle. But generally speaking, when we perform a medical procedure, we're looking to improve that person's life. And I think if we're providing that under the auspices of our Title 19 Medicaid services, then that's part of our responsibility as a government. That's part of what we are empowered to do. The cost savings for what we're trying to do here versus the cost of someone having a heart attack, a stroke, a lifetime of diabetes, and all of that prescription medication is substantially less by providing this service. Bariatric surgery, if I understand it correctly, in Connecticut right now, costs about $45,000 or $50,000. The cost of treating diabetes in 1 year is not quite as expensive as that, but it's quite expensive. And the other piece that we didn't speak to, no one spoke to here yet in this chamber, and I'll do it now, is the quality of life that someone will get back from no longer having a BMI over 35, and maybe no longer being on prescription medication for hypertension and diabetes and painkillers because their bones and muscles hurt from being overweight. Quality of life improvements may allow that person to be more productive in society. Maybe they can continue to work where maybe they couldn't before. Maybe they can become, imagine this, maybe they become undependent. I don't even know if that's a word. They're no longer dependent upon the services of the state of Connecticut. There's a lot of benefits that we're not talking about that come from this. We should be asking, what is the cost savings versus the cost of providing these services? Madam President, before I wrap up, I just want to make a couple of other comments. Connecticut is only one of 8 states that does not require private insurance companies to cover the treatment of obesity. There was a bill before the Insurance Committee this year. It did not make it out. But I think that if we find it important today, right now, in this moment, presumably we will vote on this bill shortly, if we find it important today to expand coverage to our Medicaid beneficiaries, then this body should also find it important to make those services available and required through our private insurers. Some insurance policies cover it. If you're on the state of Connecticut health insurance policy, you can obtain bariatric services. This is not a personal choice. Obesity is a disease, and if we can help to cure that disease, then we should be doing that. I urge adoption.